So welcome everyone to Unit Masters. This is cohort 10. And today we are in week 4, where we speak about NFTs and Metaverse and any kind of exciting trends in the blockchain ecosystem. And we have with us as our speaker and life mentor, Kumardev. And he is quite an amazing guy. We met in World Economic Forum this year. So it's quite a new connection, but I was very, very impressed by the way he looks at the trends and analyzes the trends regarding how can we actually think metaverse in a more systemic way. So that's why I asked him to come and share his insights that he actually also shared with Prince Albert of Monaco and other in the House of Commons in the UK last week. And so what you are hearing here is actually all the insights that also the world's leaders are actually currently trying to understand and perceive and learn with Kumardev. So Kumardev is known globally as a serial tech innovator, founder, entrepreneurial industry leader, an investor, and author with more than 25 years of strategy, deep tech, and executive leadership at startups, Fortune 500s across the world. He's also recognized as a thought leader and futurist in technology. He is an Intel and EU awarded Young Innovation Luminary, World Economic Forum appointed expert on entrepreneurship, Forbes Technology Council official member, European Commission appointed expert on technology and innovation, and very excitingly, a co-author of the EU's Digital Minds for a New Europe book, alongside with Vince Cerf, who some of you might recognize as the father of the internet, Eric Schmidt from Google, and others. So apart from that, he's also very active on the social or in the development side. He co-founded the nonprofit European Young Innovators Forum, the largest network of young innovators in Europe, recognized for its work and impact by President Obama, Chancellor Merkel, and major institutions like the World Economic Forum. So thank you so much for making the time to share with us your insights and your perspective on how to think NFTs and metaverse of the future. The stage is all yours, Kumardev.
Well, first of all, I mean, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I think you've set the bar so high that everybody's now expecting me to do magic tricks, and I will try my best to do them. But it's really an honor to be presenting to the Unit Network. As we all know, the Unit Network is composed of very respected individuals who are go-getters, entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders, and it's really a privilege for me to be able to speak to this audience and to talk about the metaverse. Also, a shout out to my friend Iker Puente, who did the very successful cannabis house this year in the Davos and is a leader in his field. And of course, Francesco Maria Blasi. Francesco, as you guys know, some of you might know, is my chief of staff and is a really wonderful guy from Hunt University, which is obviously part of the network. So with that introduction, I'm now going to do a little discussion. So I think the topic today on metaverses, and of course, there's a lot of hype about metaverses and what they do and what they don't do. So I think I'm going to focus not on the entirety of the topic, because that will take hours, and we can probably do that offline in the next unit meeting. I'll be in Singapore quite soon, so maybe we can do that there. But I'd like to focus on what Ipa put up on the topic forum, which is on the governance, regulation, ethics, and most importantly, the interoperability, because that is rapidly becoming a topic. I'm today dialing in from Zurich. So here I'm at the Point Zero Forum. The Point Zero Forum is organized by the Singaporean government and the Swiss government. It's a new intergovernmental forum on investment, and they have 2 topics. One is metaverses and crypto. In fact, there were top discussion metaverse. And the second one is, of course, ESG. And so 2 days of discussions with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Swiss Banking Authority, and all the rest. And there were, I just met CZ yesterday. I had a good discussion with CZ, the founder of Binance, who was our Singapore resident as well as in Dubai. And really, there's a lot of discussions here, and I'll try to bring some of that topic, some of that into the conversation today, particularly around the idea of regulation. How do you regulate this thing? What is this thing to start with? What is this animal that we're talking about in the metaverse? And how do you regulate that, if at all? And then, of course, the interoperability aspects. So with no further ado, I'm going to try to share, let's put it that way, my screen here. Great. So let's start with the very beginning of the beginning, as we say. So before we get into the metaverse, I mean, before we get into anything around this topic, we need to understand what is the foundation of this. And the foundation of this is not some alien space rock that landed on our planet. The foundation of this is something that has been ongoing for almost 10 to 12 years now and has finally started to take over. And that is that digital is taking over the physical world, right? So we had what I would classify the 2010s is the world of digital first, right? So and the beginning of the 2020s is also the world of digital first. So what does that mean in real terms? And when I say real terms, I mean, what does it mean in actual numbers, right? So in numbers terms, and these numbers I would say are about a quarter old. So these are the numbers from the beginning of the year. We haven't yet integrated the numbers from the first half of 2022, but trust me, they're even stronger or even more robust than what we have over here. So here, what you see is that NFT traction, and of course, a lot of bad press about NFTs, but nevertheless, the NFT traction is currently 13.2 billion in Q3 2021. That's from 0 billion or even 0 million 18 months ago. So at the beginning of 2019, the only NFTs that were really sold were some of the crypto kitties that were sold in 2017 for little amounts of money. So the NFTs were at the stage where Bitcoin was 10 years ago, right? So that was NFTs. From there, we went to 13.2 billion in 2021. And I can tell you that after Art Basel and currently NFT New York, which is happening tonight in New York time, there will be the NFT New York auction, and tomorrow you will have the numbers. The numbers will be insane in terms of the billions that will be spent tonight in New York buying NFTs. In addition to that, 17 billion of VC funds have poured in. So I really respect Warren Buffett, and I totally respect Bill Gates, but I'm sorry, guys, the numbers are not, what they're talking about has nothing to do with the numbers. So 17 billion in 2021 and 2022, already we have a lot of billions coming in. I will not give you the numbers right now because they're being validated, but it's more than 17 billion, okay? So that has gone in, and this is money from the top institutional institutions. These are people who are extremely educated in the field. Most of them come from Harvard and related institutions. They're very experienced. They're dealing with other people's money, which they have to account for. So no, they're not putting money into NFTs because it's a scam, right? This is real, and these numbers are real, and they're growing. Number two, digital payments. Banks, as we know, are not the most innovative. They're slow. I mean, 2 days with the bankers, and my dad was a banker, of course. 2 days with the bankers, it tells you how the banking world looks at the world, which is basically risk, and some profit, but risk first, right? But that banking world is now moving to digital payments. 50% of the world's top banks are investing in crypto systems. And Apple is integrating alternative payment systems. Of course, after Steve Jobs left us, Mr. Tim is, he's more an operational guy than an innovator. So it's taking them more time, but they will get there. And other payment systems are coming in. MasterCard, which is a innovator in the region, and I know Maria Medvedeva, the VP of MasterCard in the Middle East, they have just started to do direct ability for MasterCard owners to directly buy NFTs and crypto using any MasterCard, not just the crypto.com MasterCard, but any MasterCard, right? And they're getting there. And of course, they're also investing heavily into the NFT world. The next one is entertainment retail. So F1 put in 100 million in crypto sponsorship last year, but they've done a lot more since then. Fox Corp also 100 million. This is the Fox Corp that does the movies, not the Fox News, yeah? The other side of the Fox Corp. And I'm working with some of the top entertainment retail worlds in the world, brands in the world, and they're all investing in building metaverses and doing NFTs. But of course, the biggest story in the space is digital real estate. So that yacht, which is basically a set of ones and zeros, did sell for 650K in Sandbox, and it is being used in Sandbox. And virtual real estate, 2.4 million has already sold in Decentraland. These are old numbers, but if you bring it down to the basics, last year, let's say the beginning of the COVID wave in 2020, if you bought, if you were, sitting at home, had nothing to do, you logged onto Decentraland, you could buy a prime piece of land, a prime parcel of land in the center of Paris for something like $13, $14 for a parcel, right? A small parcel. Today, that's $14,000. And I'm talking about numbers from 6 months ago, right? So if you had put in $14 into buying a small parcel of land in Decentraland at the beginning of 2020, you would have, you could do the math, 14 and 14,000. It could be a little math test of what is the gain that you would have had, right? So that is the reality of the digital real estate. And we're talking here about 1% of the real estate that has gone online. The majority of the real estate has not gone online. Private land has not gone online, right? So if you think of some of the world's iconic private lands, they haven't gone online yet. And these people are now working to put that online. So digital real estate will be a big driver. So the metaverse explosion is kind of expected. It's not exactly, some people say, oh, where is this coming from? Where this is coming from is the evolution of technology and economy for the last 30 years, right? So the metaverse is basically a digital reality that combines aspects of social media, online gaming, augmented and virtual reality, and cryptocurrencies. And these things have existed and have proved their worth and have proved their markets. And what we are now doing is a platform that brings all of them together, which will be the natural next step in the evolutionary process of technology and economy. So the market outlook I have here is very interesting because these numbers came from McKinsey. And then these numbers, we looked at them at NEOM and we applied a little bit of a NEOM filter, which is a conservative filter basically over the numbers. And this is what we presented to the whole world. So these numbers are not secret. We put them out in FII and in LEAP. We talked about an $805 billion metaverse market by 2024 with a CAGR 37%. And I'll show you in the next slide or in a couple of slides later what McKinsey is saying today. Right, the same McKinsey team, and they put that data out in the public, 77-page report, if you are willing to read that report. And that tells you what the data, what the numbers are. The numbers are fantastically more than what we have actually looked at. So this was very conservative. And I remember saying at that point to everyone, this is very conservative, and McKinsey are basically saying that today. And of course, we know the big news, Facebook spending billions on metaverse. They're resizing the entire organization. They're getting rid of the old Facebook organization and people. So Cheryl is actually a part of that. Departure is a part of that. It's nothing to do with stuff that's come out. They're just rejigging the company to make it a metaverse first company. And many people who are going to leave because they don't fit that vision. NVIDIA launched the Omniverse to expand their metaverses. Epic Games, 1 billion, that was a few months ago. Now I think it's 4 billion is what they have raised to build their metaverse. Roblox, but Sandbox as well has raised about 2 billion, and SoftBank has invested in Sandbox. So you've got a good traction there. So as I was trying to say, the world of 2020 is still mostly digital first, but let's look at the bored apes. I'm sure all of you know what the bored apes are, very colorful, interesting apes from the Bored Ape company, and they did something in Art Basel, which of course took off as well. And if you really want to understand what the NFT traction, the digital traction, these numbers will tell you. So in April 2021, you could buy one for 37,000. The total sales, sorry, no, not you could buy one. The total sales of Bored Apes was at 37,557. May 2022, about a month back, it's you can just read the numbers here, 184 million. The total amount, 2 billion in about a year. So again, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Buffett and Mr. Gates, but numbers don't lie, guys. Nobody has spent this amount of money for nothing. Yeah. So this is why you've got to suspend your disbelief, just like you do when you're watching a movie. This is real, and this stuff is happening, and it's not going to go back. This 2 billion is not going to go back into anyone's wallets. But these apes, Bored Ape images are going to become more and more expensive as we go along. Some more data here, but okay, I think it's basically the same slide. I just want to put that for effect, is that, you look on the left at what you're looking at and look at the right, and that tells you how this market works. It's not based on fundamentals. Nobody's counting the number of barrels of oil in the ground, or how much production, what is the productivity, or how many people turned up at the office or did the absenteeism, how much coal was or raw materials were consumed. No one's looking at any of those indicators, but they're spending money to buy the outcome. So this is a disassociation of supply and demand. Yeah, so you cannot apply supply chain economics to this as other people are doing. So here are the latest numbers from our friends from McKinsey, 77-page report that came out last week. So 2021, 57 billion. Remember I showed you 17 billion, right? And 13 billion in direct. So it's 57 billion is what they're predicting will be the final numbers once we have them. 2022, Jan to May alone, I said it'll be much more than 17 billion, and it's about 120 billion. is the investment in metaverse technology just in 5 months. Okay, so spends on the rise, and they're projecting 5 trillion by 2030. Remember, I said 804. The numbers I gave you were 805 by 2024, but they're saying 5 trillion by 2030. And of course, they break it down further into how that will happen. But the biggest takeaway, or the biggest indicator of change on the slide, is on the bottom right. Consumer preferences, that's you and me and other consumers like you and me. So they polled 3,000 consumers across 11 countries. That's actually a pretty big poll. For those of you who are into surveys, those are pretty interesting numbers. 60% of consumers preferred at least one activity in the virtual world compared to the physical alternative. So in layman terms, instead of going to the beach, they preferred to spend those 3 hours playing a game online. Yeah, 60%. So this is not just the kids, the millennials and the others. This is everybody. So at least one activity. And so if you look at the way the question is framed, the real question will be, how many such activities do you do? So there is a definite movement behind the basic economics of the metaverse, which is that people want to spend time online even when they have a choice of not doing so. So this is not about COVID and staying at home and work from home. This is pure preferences. I want to spend time online instead of going out with my partner and spending time on the beach, if I could. But perhaps the biggest number of it all is 79, 80% almost of consumers currently active in the metaverse have already made a purchase. So those who have signed on to Decentraland or Sandbox, and these are all proto-metaverses, right? They haven't been built. They have already made a purchase. So that tells you that the suspension of disbelief is fully active. People, this is real. This is not make-believe anymore, right? And so that is what is driving the platform numbers. The economics of a metaverse is the same as the economics of a digital first platform, which is that it's the amount of time you spend online. The more time you spend online, the more you interact, and the more activities you will undertake, like buying things, and the platforms get richer and richer with that money, and they're able to scale that both in terms of value, but also in terms of monetization. So if you are going to prefer spending more time online, number one, if there are more of you, which means more people are being born, which is correct, and more people have access to digital internet, that's correct as well, then obviously more and more people are going to spend time online and going to buy things online, and the metaverse will be the metaverses will be the platforms where they will do that. So it's a no-brainer why 120 billion has been spent has been invested into metaverse technology in just the first 5 months of 2022. And at this stage, I would like to clarify, this is what I call the BS detector slide. I mean, I get a lot of people coming to me pitching metaverses and technology around metaverses. And this is what I use to sort of do the BS detection, is that these are the fundamentals of a real metaverse for me. So there are 3 of these things that I think are more or less mandatory, and remaining are optional. Number one, digital twin. A metaverse has to be a virtual version of a physical city. So Grand Auto is not necessarily a metaverse, although it does reflect LA in some ways, right? It's not necessarily a metaverse. Fortnite is not necessarily a metaverse. Some parts of Fortnite are, because they reflect a physical reality, but most parts of them are not. Minecraft is not a metaverse per se, although you could build a metaverse in Minecraft with those kinds of graphics, but you could build one. So there has to be a virtual representation of a physical infrastructure, city, or building, number one. Number two, it's a social platform. A metaverse is not a place for lonely people on 4chan type of billboards and incels. This is not what a metaverse is. You're going to have interaction. You're going to have networking. You're going to have dating. You're going to have friendships. You're going to have the full gamut of interactions that you have in the physical world on the metaverse. So it's basically Facebook on steroids, but this time you're virtually immersed in that. And you can do that in your avatar. And actually, Facebook is now allowing you to buy Balenciaga and Prada t-shirts if you want to wear that and impress the person you're talking to, right? So it is a social platform. It is a virtual representation of a physical city, which we call a digital twin today. It is a social platform, and it is a digital marketplace in the sense that you have the idea of that you can transact in crypto and NFTs. For me, out of the remaining three, integrated mixed reality, I think, is the most relevant one. Most metaverses will not be virtual reality. They will be mostly augmented reality, i.e. mixed reality. You're going to walk around in the physical world and at the same time be immersed in the metaverse through the use of augmented reality. You could put on a headset like the person has done and go full on, but you don't need to be in the metaverse. And you will have infrastructure like holographic projectors all around you, just like you have Wi-Fi routers today. You're going to have holographic projectors all around you that will, and other tools like motion detectors, etc., that will allow you to do this physical virtual at the same time, the mixed reality. Gamified experience. I always ask my customers and my governments that come to me for advice. I say, please tell me, why will somebody want to spend 1 hour of their lives online, even if they prefer spending time online? Why would they want to spend that on 1 hour on your metaverse platform and not somebody else's, right? So there needs to be gamification. There needs to be exploration, entertainment, interaction. If you don't have that, if you don't have a compelling reason to go online onto the metaverse, you'll go online, but onto somebody else's metaverse. And the real-time translation, I don't think this is the most, it's not mandatory for most cases, because I think English is somehow the lingua franca of most of the internet, and therefore will also be the lingua franca for most of the metaverse in the initial stages. But ultimately, you're going to have AI-driven real-time translation. You will speak in whatever language you want. It will be voice-driven interaction, not through your keyboard. And the AI will do the translation in real time to the language and the interaction or the user interface of the other person. Right. So the last general slide before we get into a more specific one is that these are the more relevant players today, but they're just the relevant players today, and they fall in 4 categories: the gaming industry, the metaverse, but I would say the proto-metaverse, because none of them have built one yet. The mixed reality ecosystems and the digital asset market. All of them are building some sort of metaverses or on-ramp or off-ramp to metaverses, and they're investing in metaverse tech. So the 120 billion is mostly by players in this industry, established and startups. And ultimately, you're going to have a pure metaverse category, as I think I'm pre-predicting that or anticipating that. But these are the major areas that you have in the space. So let's look at governance, regulation, ethics. When you look at the amount of money and you look at the amount of activity and you look at the traction trend, it's obvious, and I kept saying that in the last 2 days here in the forum, is that governance, regulation, ethics will happen. And I think the guy from UBS said it very well. He said, look, if you're going to make a lot of money or you're going to have a lot of activity on any platform, then it's obvious that that platform will need to have some sort of regulation, will definitely need governance, and you will have to have an ethical way of dealing with things, right? So when you come to the topic of governance, regulation, ethics, I break it down into 3 pillars. Number 1, digital conduct and harms. Number 2, platform and user liabilities. Number 3, sovereign interests, right? This is what I do. So let's take them one by one. Digital conduct and harms. So this is the governance pillar that relates to how users, not the platform, not the partners, not the suppliers, not the technology guys, not the regulator, but the users conduct themselves online individually and in groups. So of course, there are some key steps and features that have to be manifested here in any metaverse. Number 1, accepted digital norms. What is accepted in London is not accepted in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, in Riyadh. It's not accepted in Hong Kong. It's not accepted in, it's probably accepted in Sydney, but not maybe in Hong Kong. So you have to have the ability, metaverse will have the ability to reflect the norms that they are large of the sovereign state or the country or the jurisdiction where they're, or the cultural jurisdiction, if you want, where they're based. Yeah. So you could say that a metaverse that's dedicated to music might have certain different norms than the one that's dedicated to investment banking or to a private automobile club, right? But there are some norms and they will have to be implemented. Number 2, there are specific social norms. There are some things that, again, conduct-wise or language-wise are acceptable, but in some jurisdictions and not in the others. And this will have to be reflected, because let's take alcohol, for example. Alcohol is not a universally accepted goods for sale. It's universally accepted in some countries, not in others, right? So you will have to reflect that. Then it's social choices. The social choices and personal choices are not always accepted across different jurisdictions, and therefore a metaverse that is catering to the people or a population of a certain jurisdiction will have to implement specific social norms that does not implement for others, right? Individuals accepting unacceptably, you can have that in real life, and you will of course have that in the metaverse. It's a no-brainer that this is going to happen. So you will need to have steps to manage that. That cannot be, you cannot just say, like in Decentraland, I know it's not entirely the case in Decentraland, but in Decentraland, you can go and do pretty much anything you want. And that may not be acceptable, obviously. And you should be able to stop that. Facebook has some guardrails for that, and other metaverses will do that too. Group behavior, you can get together in a group and cause trouble. It may not be unacceptable behavior, but might be disruptive, right? How do you deal with that? What if a group size grows? Can that be a server attack? Or can a group size actually drown out another group, for example, in a debate, in a virtual debate? So you've got to think about these things, the dynamics of which you have that in social media today. You can get in a Facebook, people can get cyberbullied. So that cyberbullying can carry over into the metaverse, and you will have to find ways to manage that. So when you come to how to manage that, the last point is policing. Who does that? Is that done by the platform? Is that done by certain users, which we can think about as admins of groups? So who is empowered to do this? Is that a shared responsibility in a DAO? Who does that in a DAO? How do you do that? Do you do that through platform provided tools? Do you do that directly? Is there like in a conference room, if somebody behaved badly or people started behaving badly, others would probably shut down that behavior. Can we reflect that on the metaverse? And when do you do that? Is there a threshold? Is it because somebody says something mean or unacceptable once, do you immediately act, or do you wait till it gets to a certain threshold? These are fundamental questions that will have to be solved before metaverses can become mainstream. And so a lot of work is required here by the platform owners and also by the jurisdictions in which they will be released. Number two, and talking about the platform, is platform and user liabilities. So again, a couple of different things here. Number one, user conduct. Who is liable for that? If you, by mistake, I mean, you're just walking around and by mistake you cause some sort of harm. It doesn't need to be to another user. It could be to the infrastructure. It could be that you're driving a car, a virtual car, and you crash into a virtual building. Who's liable for this? I mean, to me, the platform should not even allow that to happen because the technology should not allow you to do that. But what if you could? Or what if you hacked the platform and did that? So user conduct and the liability associated with user conduct, there's no insurance in the metaverse today. I mean, I think that would be an interesting concept. Can you ensure the outcome of your virtual actions in a hypothetical world? Yeah, can you? And we don't know the answer to that, but that's a question to be pondered. Platform control. What level of control? We talked about societal norms. We talked about digital norms. I mean, what level of control should the platform have before it becomes too overbearing or excessively controlled, or too open and too loose? What's the middle path? And this will reflect the choices that users and partners make. For example, do you think a company like Louis Vuitton will get onto a metaverse where a user can go and do whatever they want, and therefore you can have users who are against leather, for example? There's a lot of people who don't like leather, animal-driven leather, animal-derived leather. They can come and put graffiti on a Louis Vuitton wall, or they can form a group outside the Louis Vuitton virtual store and prevent access. This can happen, right? So to what, and then do you want to shut that off? Is that legitimate to shut it off? Should that be allowed? Maybe Louis Vuitton would prefer to be on a platform, a retail platform for high level, for super brands where this kind of actions are not allowed, right? For example, there are Louis Vuitton stores inside Harrods. Go and try and picket that, and you will never make it inside Harrods. You leave alone get to the store. But there are Louis Vuitton stores on Sloane Square where you can do that. You can picket them. Right? So these are questions that need to be answered. What's the public space? What's the personal space or private space? And what's the shared space? And how do you manage the regulation ethics of that? Finally, civil and criminal liability. Civil liability is simple, that you can probably do through insurance, even offline insurance could probably be. Criminal liability, you hacked the platform, or you allowed somebody else to use your user identification and your authentication keys as a super user and hack the platform. So what's the liability here? Metaverses are not registered entities, right? A DAO is not a registered entity. So if it's a DAO that then has a metaverse, who's responsible for what? And where does this liability lie? Third, sovereign interest. This, I think, for me is the most important one. Is the governance pillar relating to the agenda, interest, and constraints per country as sovereign. And the reason I separate country and sovereign, because to me, a DAO can be sovereign. a distributed autonomous organization. A DAO can be sovereign because I could say that my DAO represents a virtual country, or this DAO XYZ represents a virtual country, and therefore it has its own sovereign interests. And since there's no regulation whatsoever, or even recognition of what a DAO could be in legal terms, of course you could come with a definition. So then the first question that comes there is, what is the agenda? What is the agenda when you talk about sovereign interest? Is it a societal agenda? Is it about shaping a certain viewpoint, for example, ecology or green thinking? Is it about economy? Is a DAO a private members club for automobiles, or a private members club to buy and sell goods? Is it about control? Is a DAO about let's say a religious gathering, or a gathering of people who follow a certain ideology? So what is the agenda over there? And therefore, what is the metaverse trying to reflect? I think that's where the ethics of that come in. But it's a sovereign interest, because the sovereign that hosts that DAO, whether it's a country or a data farm in a certain country, I mean, a server farm in a certain country, or a DAO, these questions have to be answered. Number two, what are the interests? What is a metaverse trying to do? Is it trying to monetize your data? Is it trying to allow monetization of services and goods? Is it just a marketing platform? What is the interest that the sovereign has, and therefore what are the rules? If it's just a marketing platform, maybe you don't want negative marketing, right? If it is a monetization platform, maybe for goods and services, maybe you want to restrict the actions that users can perform to just those things that relate to buying and say transactionally. If it is a data collection platform like Facebook, maybe you want to keep it more open and let there be a lot of interaction, because you're collecting data, and that data is what you're monetizing later on. And finally, the constraints. I mean, this is a very interesting point for me. People sometimes say, oh, there was this guy who set up a crypto company on a abundant, or I don't think it was an oil rig, but it was an abundant rig in the international waters outside Thailand. But finally, he was arrested. He and his girlfriend were arrested, and they were taken back to the US, right? So you can never really get out of a jurisdiction and say that you are in a completely, I mean, even in international waters, certain rules apply. And one of the most important rules is that any sovereign can go to international water and try and implement its own laws by picking you up. Yeah, and nobody else can stop them because there's no law to stop them, right? So wherever you are, laws of some sort will apply. But more than laws, regulations will apply. And these regulations are tied into societal norms, digital norms, and other aspects, right? And that's why I talk about norms in the end, is that you're always going to have some constraints which are going to inform the ethics and therefore the governance of these metaverses. So sovereign interest, I think, to me, is more important in certain senses than platform user liabilities, which can be managed if your sovereign interests are clearly defined, and digital conduct and arms, which can again be shaped if your sovereign interests, whether that's a national or a data jurisdiction, or a completely virtual jurisdiction like a DAO, is first established. So this is where I think the rub lies. And now we're coming closely to the end, so I'm going to go about the last point, which is interoperability. So one thing that is clear before we get to interoperability, one thing that is clear is that if you look at the scope so far, it's obvious that there's not going to be one metaverse, which is again another misunderstanding. There will be multiverses or multiple metaverses for different. You'll have a metaverse for work. You'll have different metaverses for play. You'll have metaverses for that are customized to your interest. You will have metaverses that relate to your monetization and your spending needs in plain language. What do you want to buy? What do you want to consume? You'll have metaverses related to communities that you're a part of. So there will be multiple metaverses that you will log in and log on to, log on and log off on a daily basis, right? And so how does all that work? Because let's assume you are one person, you have one identity. Okay, maybe you have 5 identities, but nevertheless they're tied back to one actual individual. These 5 identities could have 5 different avatars and could have 5 different look and feel. But ultimately, how do the actions that you have on one link to one identity carried forward? A very simple question to answer here is, a lot of us who are a little bit older, we grew up with Facebook, or we didn't grow up with Facebook. We discovered Facebook in our college days. And then at that point, we started adding friends. And today we have thousands of friends on Facebook, including some friends from childhood. And we're not connected to these friends on anything else. Some of us are not even connected on WhatsApp or on any other platform. And so if you want to share some news, like, okay, we went to this conference or we did that, we use Facebook because that's the best way to get to a really wide spectrum of our friends and our associates. So are we going to start a new metaverse platform or work on a new metaverse platform or involve us in a new metaverse platform where we have to build all these connections from scratch? Are we going to forget everything we did on LinkedIn so far and start from scratch? I'm pretty sure we are not, right? And there's a lot of technology companies today, both big ones and startups, that are focusing on that issue, which is basically the interoperability issue. So if you look at different metaverses and the scope, on the left-hand side, you have your own or your custom metaverse. This is the kind of metaverse that will be built by companies. Our Neom is building one. The US, there are a number of companies that are building one, private metaverses that are being built for specific purposes. And there, the ease of build is low because you obviously have to start from scratch. You have to acquire assets. There's a lot of work to be done. On the other side, you have the more widely open public platforms like Decentraland and Fortnite. Of course, each of them have a different on-ramp process. You cannot just go to Fortnite and build your startup companies building or your automobile clubs building on Fortnite. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. You have to first have a partnership with them, identify a plot, purchase the land, and then design and build a structure. But yeah, the designing and building is much easier because they have all the tools and they have already set up the structures, but it's much more expensive than doing it. So there are choices to be made on either side, but what is clear is that no matter what choice you make, you would want to be able to port your data and your connections and your assets between these different platforms. If I buy a very nice Prada t-shirt on the Meta store on Meta, I don't just want to use that in Meta. I want to use that when I go to Decentraland. I want to use that when I go to my private community metaverse on the weekend. So that data has to be actually shared, and that data has to be interoperable. That the actions to be interoperable. So interoperability is huge, and the industry is just now starting to talk about that, right? So here I think there's a slight error on the slide, but okay, let's continue in that way. So let's say you have the difference between the heading is a bit mixed up. I don't know why that's there, but basically, if you want to go with your own customized different metaverses, on the other hand, you want to use, let's say, a public or a platform that is established. These are the kinds of things that you will have. So on one hand, you'll have inconsistent branding and feel and experience because the different platforms that you use for your company to be on the metaverse will obviously have different standards and different ways. Like a sandbox has a very old style of visuals, whereas things built on Unity or on Eclipse, Epic are Unreal 5 or 4 are much more sophisticated, right? So you have differences in look and feel. Whereas if all your companies or all your metaverses that you use were on Epic or Unity, they would have a consistent look and feel. Siloed implementations, each of them, as we said from the previous slide, have different ways of working. And of course, these different ways of working will have different methods. And so you will have, you have to implement different non-communicative blocks. But if you have the same platform or similar platforms built on the same engine, then you have the interoperability. Similarly, with the assets, we just talked about the assets, data and insights, we talked about that. So ultimately, it comes on total cost of ownership. As you're trying to make decisions about interoperability, oh, why do I need to be interoperable? Okay, yeah, maybe you don't need to be interoperable, but then you'll have a higher total cost of ownership and significant upfront investment to build and maintain and scale your metaverse. Whereas if you are interoperable with other metaverses and you're able to share assets, data, insights, and allow that consistency of look and feel, which means that you use the same engines as some of the other metaverses, then you're going to have a more affordable total cost of ownership and pricing models. So that in a nutshell is what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. This is really like kind of, I don't know, I love the way you structure information and the passion that comes when you share about it. Thank you so much. So we have a few questions from the audience. The first one is like, for beginners, how does one start into looking into which metaverses to invest? Like, how can I be a good early adopter? And the follow-up question to that is, if I don't want to invest by myself, but I want to do it with a group of people, is it possible to do so?
So the first thing I need to say here is, and I was reminded of that by my lawyers today, is that, of course, we're all in different jurisdictions here. I mean, I'm in Zurich, you guys are in different places. Different countries have different rules around investment advice. And as I'm not an accredited investment advisor in some countries, I am unable to give you specific investment advice. So I can't tell you invest here, don't invest there, do this, don't do that. And that's a disclaimer that goes for my entire presentation. It's about sharing data and insights, but I'm not actually advising anybody to invest or not invest in any of the different topics and different assets and different platforms I talked about. But in terms of your question, I think the more generic answer is that if you want to learn about metaverses, first of all, start learning about crypto, right? Because crypto is the basis of where this is, number one. And number two, learn about the immersive world, the VR and the AR world. This will take you some time because you need to get into some fundamentals of what this is. Some of these things are very obvious because we've seen them. We've all seen Avatar. We've all watched 3D movies, and we've all probably gone to Coinbase or crypto.com and done a transaction. Some of these things might be fairly obvious, but this is where you need to start. And therefore, you cannot do that. It's going to be a few days, probably maybe a week or so, because you need to process that information, go back and forth. But once you do that and then read Snow Patrol, yeah, then watch Ready Player One. So there's a roadmap here, right? So get to know the basics. Read Snow Patrol, Snow Crash. I don't know why. Snow Patrol is a video game that I used to play back in the day. Snow Crash, and then go and Nielsen Snow Crash, and then read about, and then look at Ready Player One. And then you can jump. You'll have a very good understanding of what a metaverse is meant to be, and then you can log on to Decentraland, SoundDissolve. You can create free accounts there and get a feel for what they're trying. If you're in the US, you can log on to Horizon, which is the Facebook's Meta platform. Meta's platform actually, and then you can figure out from there.
So now you just mentioned, I want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure.
If you want to learn about metaverse, you need to learn about crypto.
Yeah.
What do you like? What makes you think these two concepts are so fundamentally interlinked that one cannot understand them separately?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna, in the meantime, since people are asking hundreds of questions and I will not have the chance, just connect to me. Please connect to me at this. And Francesco, on your behalf, I'm volunteering your email. So please email Francesco, my wonderful, and he's a really nice guy, and he's a wonderful COS as a chief of staff as well. So I'm putting his email here. He will hate me for this later on, but maybe we can schedule some time. And he acts as a filter. So if he thinks that it's not worth scheduling my time for this, then that's it. There's no further recourse. But if you email me directly anyway, nothing will get through. But do connect to me on LinkedIn, because then I share a lot of insights on LinkedIn, and a lot of these questions you will get if you follow me on LinkedIn and Insta and stuff. You will see a lot of the answers to the questions, because I share wherever I go, whatever conferences I do, I try and share the outcomes and the discussion. But on your question, Eep, I think it's a fundamental question. And technically, if I answer this technically, you can have a metaverse that has nothing to do with crypto. So a metaverse can be purely based on an immersive world where you use fiat, which is fiat currencies, and you have nothing to do with crypto at all. And in fact, a lot of the proto metaverses today, Facebook, Fortnite and Sandbox and Decentraland, they're all pretty much, you can use fiat in many of them, right? So so it's not technically a reason. Why do you need to understand crypto? Because that gives you the fundamental of what decentralization is. And what is the difference between a centralized world that we're living in and a decentralized world that we're moving to, right? So Unit Network is an example of a DAO. And now you guys are building a DAO, and you need to understand these concepts. And I think crypto will give you a very good explanation of the theory and the philosophy behind why a metaverse is there. It will not give you everything, but you will need to understand, but it'll help you get to the basic pillars of why a metaverse is required. Now, if you read Snow Crash, there's no mention of crypto in Snow Crash. Of course, they have talked about, in certain senses, they've talked about digital assets, but not in the way that we see them today. Which is why I think Snow Crash as a novel alone is not good enough. You need to also learn crypto, not the terrific details, but the just general idea of what is a Bitcoin, and what is it, what is blockchain technology, what is Bitcoin, what is a consensus protocol, some basic stuff that will help you in your understanding. But yes, technically, you can absolutely have a metaverse that has no crypto whatsoever.
Thank you. So thinking about the timeline,
Yeah.
how far are we actually away in your view to really experiencing a smoothness metaverse? And what is after metaverse? What do you think?
No, that's a fantastic question, Eep, and obviously you are very deep in the community, in all these communities, so you know, and the question is very good. So my first answer to that, and please everybody, this is I think very important to understand. There are no metaverses today. Neom's metaverse is not live, neither is Meta's. I mean, Zuckerberg will keep repeating that it'll take him 5 years to get there. I think it'll take him much less, but he's just putting that number out there to desensitize the competition. Decentraland is a proto metaverse. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. Sandbox has to rebuild the visual interface before it can become a real. Roblox is a game. Yeah, it's a video game that is metaverse-like, but so is Mario Brothers. Yeah. So none of them are metaverses today. And although all these billions are going in there, nothing is available. So my prediction, based on my knowledge of what is happening with the different companies and the different stages of development of different platforms, I think we're going to see the first, as you call it, a smooth metaverse experience, immersive mixed reality metaverse with some NFTs that you can trade at the end of the year. I don't think it will be widely available, so millions of people will not be able to log on. It will be sectioned out. There will be invitations and closed user groups and things like that. But there will be that experience. And so in the CES next year and all the big conferences in Davos next year, we are going to see demonstrations of actually live metaverses that if you're lucky enough, you can get a login into. 18 months to 2 years from now is when the floodgates will start opening, because all this money that is going in will have to obviously result in outcomes. And it's really 2 years later, from 2 years onwards, so end of the beginning of 2024, if my maths is correct, is when you're going to see metaverses being more and more mainstream. So this is the same sort of roadmap as you saw with crypto. It was only Bitcoin in the beginning, then Ethereum, and then stable coins. I mean, stable coins came later. You had a lot of other coins in between, and then stable coins. So it took about 3 to 4 years. Drone technology is the same thing. It takes 3 to 4 years for anything remotely maturing. What comes after the metaverse? Again, brilliant question, Eve. And for me, I think the answers have actually been provided. We are moving towards a singularity. I believe that. I think it's probably a few decades away. But we are moving to a point where collective intelligence and collective consciousness and collective actions merge. So yes, you can imagine a ultimate verse or a universe of metaverse, ultimate or uni metaverse or ultimate verse, where you are able to bring online in the same platform the majority of the world's population, but also the majority of the world's AI. Remember, AI is moving very fast. Now AI is able to talk and create its own languages. Google's AI is sentient. That's absolutely true. The guy, he wasn't lying. He's scared. He's left, but he wasn't lying. And that's the one that we know about. There are others out there that we don't know about. This deep thing in the UK that Google spin-off, they have DeepMind, they have even more advanced AI than that. So AI, which is going to be another member of the global population, will be on there, right? And so we will have this collective fusion of our intelligence, of our consciousness in certain senses, and our actions. Just like you have an anthill. If you have ever seen an anthill, anybody observed an anthill on YouTube or anything else or in real life? It moves as one unit, but there are millions of ants, millions of them. They all have different distributed functions, but the whole thing moves as one unit. And that's why they survive in floods, because in a flood, the anthill actually spreads out into a floating mass and they all survive. Yeah. And that tells you what is the power of collective intelligence. And we're going to get there before we end up bombing each other. Beautifully
said. Wow. Yeah. This is why also we have this Unit Masters program, so we can all help each other learn more.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Move is like one body with many different brains and many different hands to bring about the token economy and see the next technological innovations come to life, moving towards a world in which yes, we move as a collective. Thank you so much. Like seriously, it's always a pleasure. And everybody, please follow Kumardev on Twitter and on LinkedIn. He really posts very interesting and thought-provoking content. Thank you so much for being with us today, and everyone else. See you next week to listen to Paolo Bortolini, who implemented a digital currency in Switzerland, in Lugano. So he's going to share his first results of what is happening actually to bring a token to a city.
Thank you very much for organizing it. As usual, I really wonder how you do so many things, and all of them are excellent. So, but really, thank you very much. It was a real honor to speak to the community, and hopefully we connect and we keep in touch, and we'll meet each other maybe in different conferences. I will be in Singapore soon. I'll drop you a note.
All right. Thank you. See you around. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.